Greetings, connectional family. It's good to be back with you all on such a special occasion. I invite you to join with us in this moment of commemoration, life after, a commemorative dialogue centering the voices of Mother Emannuel and Galveston, Texas. Our conversation for tonight is one that centers the voices of Galveston, Texas, and centers the voices of Mother Emannuel, but particularly in a way that recognizes that the same withholding of critical information from enslaved Black Texans until June 19th, 1865, by people who had bought into the myth of white supremacy is the same ideological lineage that led Dylan Roof to Mother Emannuel AME Church in South Carolina on June 17th, 2015, 2015 with the intention of murdering a people whose only crime was their audacity to be alive and to be free. So we're talking now about life after the trauma, life after white supremacy, life after the violence, and what it means to live into a reimagined world fueled by our will to define ourselves for ourselves. And so I thank you all for your commitment to this lineage of remembering, this lineage of history and reclamation of our story and our power, even amid moments that may be challenging for us. And so I want to welcome a few folks who will be joining us in conversation. Miss Rose Simmons, who is the daughter of Reverend Dr. Daniel Simmons Sr. Welcome to you, Miss
Thank
Rose.
you.
Yes, ma'am. I also want to welcome Reverend L. Robin Murray, who is the Associate Pastor of Abundant Life AME Church in Texas. Welcome to you, Reverend Murray.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome to Brother Lee Bennett Jr., the historiographer of Mother Emannuel in South Carolina. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So if you are listening on any of our platforms, I invite you all to get busy in the chat rooms. Send us a note or a comment to let us know that you're here and where you're joining from. And if you have any questions or comments throughout the dialogue, we invite you to drop those in the comment section as well. So, all right, family, we won't belabor the moment any longer. I'm going to jump right in and ask our first question to those of you who are on this panel. Thank you again for being with us. If each of you could just share with me a little bit about your context and what brings you into this space, what makes this space one that is important for you to participate in and lend your voice and gifts to.
I'm going to yield to the ladies there.
Go ahead, Reverend. You start.
Wonderful. So again, Reverend Robin Murray, and I am here in Dallas, Texas, not exactly Galveston, but I am born and raised in Texas. And being an AME pastor in what we call sunny South Dallas, it's area primarily of Black and brown people. It's under-resourced, but we're full of fire and heart. And I'm here today because I have spent my life after seminary dedicated to social justice and ensuring that there is a way for our people to be liberated through the systems that govern our lives. These are the same systems that existed and are still in play today with these two critical points in history, Juneteenth and the massacre at Mother Emannuel. These systems that have uplifted white supremacy and caused our people and other people of color not to thrive is why I'm here. And this is the perfect platform because we as people of faith definitely know that in order to reimagine a new system, it requires us to lean on something bigger than ourselves, which is our faith, because we are leaning on God above the things that we see with our natural eyes. So that is why I'm here today, because I want to be able to share with these wonderful people in the conversation.
Well, hello, family, AME family. My name, of course, is Rose Simmons, and I am the daughter of Reverend Dr. Daniel Lee Simmons Sr., better known in the AME Church as Super Simmons. And I'm honored to be here to represent my father. Of course, he was one of the 9 that perished in Mother Emannuel, the shooting that took place 9 years ago this week. Um, I concur with Reverend Robin. Uh, um, there's change going about here, and there are systems that are still in place. And it is very important for me to be a voice for my father, though he can't speak here on this earth. But in his death, he speaks very loudly. And I have appointed myself to make sure that the words spoken in his death, and even so importantly, the words that he has spoken in his life are heard. And I'm here to do just that.
Well, good evening. My name is Lee J. Bennett Jr., a member of Emmanuel AME Church. Been a long time member. Certainly, I introduced to the church, starting in the church, probably going back to 1957. Um, Grew up in the neighborhood there in the community of the church, the east side of Charleston, South Carolina, which we sometimes refer to as the borough, affectionately referred to that. I am the historian at Mother Emannuel AME Church, just one of the duties there, in addition to some other duties. And I want to just provide, hopefully, somewhat of a historical perspective.
All right. Well, thank each and every one of you again for your presence and for sharing with us a little bit about your background and what brings you into the space. Each of you, a very unique perspective. For those of you who are listening, as you heard, some of them come from Mother Emannuel in an official capacity as historiographers, some in a very personal capacity. And then we also have our guest who has been in the fight for social justice and in academia for quite some time. And so everybody lending to this dialogue their own perspective. I want to start with you, probably, Brother Bennett. Mother
Mhm.
Emmanuel was established, its current building in 1865, correct?
Well,
Or is that,
well, I'll put it in perspective for you, but that's a good segue of going in when we say 1865, because that's going to tie in to how we got there in the first place.
yeah.
It's slightly a little bit in the beginning, so I can start now and just tell you a little bit of background there.
Hmm.
But certainly, I'll put you in the area of around 1816. And in 1816, at that time, we have Morris Brown and other Black people were members of the White Methodist Church in Charleston, South Carolina. For them, specifically, was Old Bethel, not far from the current site of Emmanuel AME Church right now. But they had membership with very few privileges. And the privileges they had at that time were being threatened. For example, things like handling your own finances, meeting times, etc. And so for them, the culminating event was the fact that the leadership there at the church had decided to build a hearse house or carriage house over the top of the Black burial ground. And so Morris Brown and others decided enough was enough, and he led some 1,000 followers out of the church with his goal of affiliating himself with Richard Allen's newly founded church. And we know that Richard Allen started in 1787, but it took to about 1816 for him to actually free himself from the White Methodist Church. That's the time period we're talking about. And so Morris Brown now walks out of the White Methodist Church, and the first thing he has to do is to form a place to meet, congregational sites. And so he forms one in Ansonboro in the city, another one in Cow Alley, which we now call Philadelphia Alley, most established was in the Hampstead suburbs of the city, and he called this conglomeration the Bethel Circuit. Now, one of the noted members of the Hampstead congregation is Denmark Vesey. Now, this Hampstead congregation and Morris Brown leaving was the beginning of what was referred to as the African church movement in Charleston. But Denmark Vesey was one of the noted members of the Hampstead congregation and a slave African born around 1767. And his master, Joseph Vesey, brings him to Charleston in 1783. Denmark Vesey won the East Bay Lottery back in 1799, some $1,500, and he's able to take $600 of his winnings and purchase his freedom from his master, Joseph Vesey. Now, Joseph Vesey didn't have to agree to that deal. He could have simply just taken all the money away from Denmark Vesey, or he could have had him continue to work on consignment. He was a very skilled carpenter in Charleston, South Carolina. But for whatever reason, he agreed to the deal. May have been benevolence, because we know that his background was a slaver. And Denmark Vesey was able to go into the next year as a free man. But he was unable to purchase the freedom of his wife and children. They were owned by someone else by the name of James Evans. And though he may have had the resources, his wife and children remained in bondage. Denmark Vesey led the planned slave insurrection of 1822. And that's the narrative. He led the planned slave insurrection of 1822. But as a result of the plan being disclosed, someone told their master. We know at least Peter Prelude was one of those people. And once the plan was disclosed, you had 131 people who were rounded up, arrested, many of them members of the African church. You had 93 who would go to trial. You had 38 who would be released for lack of evidence. You had 26 who were acquitted, but 11 of the 26 who were acquitted were deemed so dangerous by this Charleston tribunal that they were sent into permanent exile out of the United States. And then you had 35 who were executed. Denmark Vesey and 5 others were executed on July the 2nd of 1822, somewhere between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. in the morning. And then you had 22 black men all executed at the same time, same place, same date, on July the 26th of 1822. The newspaper articles said that these men were forced to sit in wagons on top of their coffins and then paraded around downtown Charleston before they were taken to the gallows, a place called the Lines. The gallows were poorly prepared, no crowd control. At least one enslaved child was killed when he fell from the wagon and was trampled by horses. And because the gallows were poorly prepared, they didn't work properly. So many of them were shot in the back of the head. And so when it was all said and done, you had 35 that were executed. And then some of the citizens of the city decided to destroy the church in 1822. Now, this is the church that's the precursor to the site where Mother Emannuel is today. And then you had laws that were already on the books that were now being vigorously enforced. Laws like the Negro Seamen's Act of 1822, which essentially said if you were a free black sailor and you came into port here in Charleston, you would be removed from your ship and then locked in the city jail. And you had to remain in the city jail until your ship left port. That was called the Negro Seamen's Act of 1822. And then South Carolina state legislation closed all of the African churches from 1834 until 1865. And also a part of that law, it was against the law to teach African Americans to read and write during the period of 1834 to 1865. In 1865, the Civil War ends. And once the Civil War ends, remember that congregation, the Hampstead congregation, continued to worship in secrecy and then reemerged in 1865 and bought the land on the current site. Bishop Daniel Payne comes back into town. He had been in exile for some 30 years. So why is he in exile? Because he was running a school on Trad Street during that time. And again, it was against the law to teach African Americans to read and write. But he comes back in 1865 to help reestablish the church. And he selects Richard Harvey King to be the first pastor of Emmanuel. And this is the first time that we're using the name Emmanuel, God be with us. And they lay a cornerstone and erect a church. And that church is completed in 1872. And that architect is one of Denmark Vesey's sons, Robert Vesey. But that church is destroyed by the earthquake of 1886 and then rebuilt in 1891, completed in the spring of 1892. And that is the edifice that we're in today.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you for sharing such a rich history and such a rich legacy that we all stand on the shoulders of. I want to switch gears a little bit from the history and ask you all how you would couple that history with the 1865 emancipation of enslaved people in Galveston, Texas. How you would couple this spirituality that rests at the heart of resistance, at the heart of these enslavement revolts, and at the heart of our need to establish for ourselves. How would you couple that spirit with the history? How do these two moments, taking place in distinctly different areas, in distinctly different geographic locations, serve as simultaneous catalysts for national and international freedom movement? And any of you can answer that.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So one of the things that, as I was listening to the history, that stood out for me is the fact that there was the creation of the Black church. And the creation of the Black church in and of itself is a form of resistance. It was a show of Black autonomy, of our advancement, of our power. And that is the beginning to me of the catalyst, of the ability for us to bring up some form of resistance through our religion and spirituality. And we have to also realize that with the emancipation, we didn't have the streams of communication that we have today. It was a slow process. And as the Union Army was beginning to move through the South to let those who were enslaved know, our ancestors know that they were free, before that was happening, people were moving their slaves to Texas. And there were chatter and talks about the possibility of freedom even before the 19th of June took place. So when the announcement was actually made, I can imagine that there had already been people who had dreams and desires beyond enslavement, beyond oppression, to be able to imagine a life that they are able to control themselves, to govern themselves. And so once that announcement was made, I imagine there were a lot of reactions, some who had those hopes and dreams. We know for a fact that people immediately migrated to parts of the country where they felt like they could thrive. Additionally, we know that there were some folks who had fears and concerns, and what are we going to do? But at the end of the day, I used the word in the beginning, the reimagining. I think that form of resistance happened with that reimagining of the possibility to be able to do what God has designed me to do without being enslaved. And I would tie that today to a reimagining of the systems that we have. We are operating under age-old evil systems, and it's going to take some reimagining, similar to the bold reimagining that happened during those two in those two places during that time period.
Thank you, Reverend Murray. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll let you jump in there, Brother Bennett.
Yeah, I really, in terms of the connection, just also wanted to mention that here we are, the Civil War in 1861 starts in South Carolina and arguably ends kind of officially in Galveston, Texas. Here we are, South Carolina being the first state, I guess, succeeding from the Union, making the decision to. And in Galveston, Texas, or Texas being the last to comply with the ending of slavery. So I see that connection and tying in. And then as we look at where are we right now, I guess press terminology is that things are changing, but we're taking baby steps. And in some ways, as we reimagine, we're going backwards in some regards, and especially in some particular states.
I appreciate what you all are naming in our current context are challenges for us. Reverend Murray, what you call the evils that we are facing, I will call them carceral systems, systems of death dealing, systems of enslavement and re-enslavement, just by different names and in different forms. And so you have mass incarceration, you have issues economically and politically, gatekeeping economically and politically, that all form what you name as evils and I would call carceral systems. And so the history that we're discussing right now has relevance in our current context. And so I appreciate you all for pointing that out. Did you want to jump in here and add something, Ms. Simmons?
I like what Reverend Robin said about resistance, and I liken that unto what happened in Mother Emannuel that night when the nine resisted hate, actually, and they resisted the norm. You know, their flags may have gone up, but they chose love instead. So I like that as well, and also I like governing themselves. I like what Reverend Robin said about that, and that's one thing my father always wanted to be able to do was govern himself in his life, and he you know that he was striving to do that, and he did accomplish that. And I want to point out, as Brother Lee was talking about the church and so forth, my father's father was actually born in 1895. And I say this because I was born in 1964. My grandparents, all of them were born by 1914. My great grandmother was born in 1877 and passed away when I was 24 years old. So I was able to talk with her. I was a teenager then, well, in growing up with her. But I was able to talk with her and knew that her parents were slaves. So I'm very close to slavery. And I wanted to bring out those dates. And all of my grandparents, they all, I was 40 when the last one died. And it's so important when I think about this because my grandparents were sharecroppers, and which is one step up from slavery. And they actually taught me how to be a sharecropper. I'm a sharecropper too. I worked with them because that's all they knew. And when I look back on that, that was entrepreneurship, even though it's under the heading of sharecropping. But they always worked and owned everything that they had except for the land. And I was listening to the conversation. I don't know if that's important, but that's what I had to add. That I understand completely what Reverend Robert was saying, and always appreciate Brother Lee in speaking about Emmanuel.
Yeah, yeah. It's all important. Let me affirm you. It's all important because it's all a part of our story and it's all a part of our history. And the only way for us to hold on to it and build for our tomorrow is for us to learn that history and to glean from one another the lessons that we have learned from the telling of the story. So thank you for sharing. We're going to take a quick moment to hear from one of our sponsors, McDonald for historiographer.
Greetings. I am the Reverend Cynthia Parnell McDonald, and I am honored to present myself as a candidate for the position of historiographer, editor of the AME Review, and executive director of research and scholarship. My aspirations is to carry forward the legacy initiated by Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, a tradition rooted in elevating our rich history. My connection to the AME Church runs deep as a lifelong member and third-generation pastor, currently serving as the pastor of Cosmopolitan AME Church in Atlanta, Georgia. Over the past 6 years, I have worked in the Department of Research and Scholarship, assisting with grants, research, conference development, and webinar moderation. My teaching and research roles, as well as my experience as a grant writer successfully managing grants exceeding $3 million, has further prepared me for this unique position that demands both pastoral and scholarly acumen. My educational background includes an earned PhD in educational leadership and research and a Master of Divinity degree from Candler School of Theology, Emory University. As historiographer, I believe that history is now more than ever. Given this, my campaign encompasses three main goals: to preserve, to promote, and to propel us toward becoming powerhouses of social impact while bridging generational gaps and paving the way for innovative engagement. To achieve these goals and more, I humbly request your support as a candidate for the esteemed position of historiographer. To learn more about our campaign, to volunteer, or to contribute financially, please visit our website. I am Cynthia Parnell McDonald, and I am dedicated to becoming the 15th historiographer of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Thank you for your consideration, and may God bless you bountifully.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, family. I want to hear from you all. Where do you notice a reclamation of faith, freedom, and fortitude emerging in the aftermath of it all from your own context, whatever the it all may be in your context? How are you and your communities leaning into our shared history and spirit to participate in a reimagined world, one that precedes and outlives white supremacy?
Well, I will say what I've experienced since the shooting. A lot of times when I'm off speaking somewhere, I'm encountered by a lot of uh, white people, Caucasians, and they come up to me personally and apologize to me for slavery. Now, I was puzzled at first when they would be so sincere in apologizing to me for slavery because of what happened to my father. And I really had to take it in prayer. I had to take it to the Lord because it would happen more times than none. And I said, Lord, there's something going on here that I'm not getting. Why are they coming to me to apologize? I wasn't a slave. They weren't slave owners, even, although our history dictates otherwise. But to be in 2000, 15, 16, 17, 18, this is what I'm getting. So it took a while, maybe because I wasn't listening as closely as I should, but I finally got an answer that when I asked the Holy Spirit to explain to me, why are these people asking me for forgiveness for slavery? And his answer was very simple. And I don't know why I couldn't come up with it myself. And he said to me, he said, Rose, he said, the reason why they are asking you for forgiveness is because they've felt the exact same way that the perpetrator, the shooter, has. And he said, when they see it acted out in its fullness, then they're ashamed that they even had those thoughts in the beginning. And he said, the shame is so great until you represent, when you're out, those that are deceased. And you're the closest thing to an act of forgiveness that they may ever have when it comes to those thoughts that they have been having that they're ashamed of. And I said, oh, that's what it is. So now when they ask me to forgive them, I understand. And I said, don't worry, God forgives you even more. So I have a better understanding. And the Lord shared that with me. And I'm so happy.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So for me, one of the things that I recognized, so I've been in community organizing since 2015. And the purpose of that is to be able to recognize what issues exist and how do you solve those issues in communities that are local, state, and national. And in Black and Brown communities, especially Black communities, we were seeing a lot of issues surrounding people being under-resourced. There was a mention of incarceration. We're incarcerated at higher rates. All of these things are steeped in the ideology of white supremacy and in the systems that uphold it. And so when I think about the ways in which there has been impact, and when I think about kind of what that looks like, I think about the fact that at the end of the day, for my work, I've seen there's the question of life after with possibility. So life after with the possibility of finding a way to govern ourselves in a different direction. A part of my work included working with white people who had that same kind of guilt that was just mentioned, that same kind of shame, if you will. And that was a really hard thing to do. But we also experienced, we being the people that I worked with in our attempts to change the incarceration system, we had people who were white who worked alongside us, saw that as a way to kind of change the system and to get back to a place where we can find, I don't know, find a way to work together beyond what we were seeing. But at the end of the day, you can't, it's a slow moving process. It's been years that we have gotten to this point where we need to recognize that these systems are not going to change on their own. And, you know, people can come and they can, you know, apologize or they can try to work in the system. But I have found that with white people, it's having conversations among their own people, having the courage to do that. For us, with Black people, going boldly to stand for that which we believe we deserve, but not even deserve, just to be treated equitably in this country so that we can move to a place of liberation. And so, yeah, I think for me, that is what I've noticed in my work, is being able to, in our context, find ways to come together to reclaim our power and to be able to impact local, state governments that try to govern us in a way that we do not believe is viable.
I want to take a look at it from a different perspective, maybe the history perspective background. And, you know, I live in the Holy City, and we always say there's probably a church on every corner. But historically, growing up, never had an opportunity, may have a church that's only 50 yards away from my church, but I've never had an opportunity to be in that church and worship. Some things have changed. There have been deliberate efforts to come together, spend time in other spaces that you probably never would have in houses of faith. and I've been able to do that. I've been able to spend time in the Greek Orthodox Church. I've been able to spend time in the Jewish synagogue and just visiting other churches. And this is something that was a third order effect of coming out of this in the aftermath. Also, it shouldn't take 9 people losing their lives to have these discussions, having discussions about symbols and divisive symbols and things of hatred. And specifically talking about the Confederate flag flying over the state capitol in South Carolina. I remember gatherings of people asking them, do they know when historically that flag went up over the state capitol? And basically not one person in the room could answer. And once it was revealed that historically and factually that the flag went up in 1962, then you're having a different conversation on how certain things make people feel. And the ability to then go forward should not have taken 9 people losing their lives to open that dialogue. But those were some of the things that certainly were coming out of that. When I grew up, we whispered Denmark Vesey's name. It was in a whisper. We were told that Denmark Vesey was a terrorist. Denmark Vesey was a brute. And it's just until recently we're able to at least have a different narrative. Denmark Vesey as a liberator, Denmark Vesey as a revolutionary. And that was huge to be able to do that. It's important that we continue to tell our story, because somebody else is going to steal it. But to tell our story and make sure that our children understand the truth and the facts, because in some ways we are going backwards. But those were some of the things, and getting people to come. Perhaps they came for a different reason. But as we sit and having people who would not have visited the church and would not want to come do a tour, we're talking about the 206 years of history, and certainly of which the tragedy is a part. But you're sharing stories about your calling Denmark Vesey's names and stories that people have not heard. And you're making them understand how it makes people feel in a way that we can go forward and change some of the divisive activities that happen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your perspective. I appreciate something that you said, Ms. Simmons in particular, where you talked about the love that was extended, the peace and the grace that was extended, even in a moment of dis-ease and discomfort. And the reason why I appreciate that you placed emphasis there is because it places primacy on the personhood as opposed to on the victimization. And so I just want to ask a question that I feel is tied kind of in a circular way. It's a circular way. When we say the term life after, what does that mean for you? How does that resonate with you? And I'll start by saying, for me, it resonates because to me, life after is exactly what it was before. It's redemption is what it was before the fall. Redemption is you return to this place of grace, in this place of wholeness, in this place of wellness, this place of love, this place of peace that was in the beginning, and so shall it be in the end. So that's the resonance for me. Where do you find meaning in the phrase life after? How does it resonate with you?
Actually, I love that question because I'm of a perspective that those 9 lives were not a mishap. They, were not drawn out of a hat, but they were chosen. They were chosen to be seeds in this earth to exact change and to grow a root of forgiveness. That's my belief. And for the life after, for me, is a joyous one because now the world has an opportunity to learn about forgiveness and even ask for forgiveness. And as I said earlier, with the question, with coming to me to ask me to forgive them for slavery, I mean, did that happen before the shooting? Not to me, and probably not to many other African Americans. But life after means we have a road paved, we have shoulders to stand on, we have names to call every day, the nine, and we have this huge opportunity to not let their lives be in vain, but to soldier on and go forth and work with people like Reverend Robin in all of the things that she's doing, and even in with Lee, and help him to tell his story about Mother Emanuel. Life after, for me, if I can be a tad bit more personal, I'm a dreamer, and I've seen my father many times in my dreams, and we've had conversations, and some even about the shooting. Um, so life after is a broad statement for me. But as far as the nine, we've got work to do. That's the way I see it.
Hmm. To me, we said life after, the words that come to mind for me in the phrase is resiliency and resistance. In life after, um, in the aftermath, not changing who you are or whose you are. The doors of the church are still open, in terms of life after and resiliency there. So I still see us moving forward, and I still take the energy from those, the Hampstead congregation. Your church is burned to the ground. The laws have changed. 35 people are executed, but you still continue to worship underground in secrecy and then reemerge. Life after, resiliency. And we are still here, life after, and not changing who we are and whose we are. And the doors of the church are still open.
Yeah, and I would add, for me, when I think about life after, I think about the reclamation of our individual and collective humanity, reclamation of our power beyond tragedy, beyond trauma, beyond all of the pain that we carry with us. Life after is being able to lean in our faith that prayerfully is where our anchor is during times of trouble, during times of need. Life after is seeing our youth understand the history and make ties to today. Life after is being able to be excited about the fact that even though there are systems and people, elected officials, who are trying to roll back important laws that allow us to govern our lives, even though that happens, life after is rising above and coming together and making space to create the things that we need to solve our own problems. And finally, I'm reminded of the text, because none of this happens without the supernatural power of God. And so I think about Hebrews 4, and I'm going to read it. Hebrews 4:15-16, which says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested, as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." Being able to have that boldness to be able to get the help that we need in times of need is a part of life after.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. She done took us to church. We may as well end the live stream right there. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Reverend Murray. I appreciate that thoughtful response. We're going to take one more brief pause to hear from another one of our sponsors, Mr. Gregory Eason for Bishop.
My name is Gregory Eason, a candidate for Episcopal service in 2024. Leadership determines the moral and spiritual environment in which the church operates. With over 40 years in ministry and 37 years as a pastor, you can count on me to do what is right and lead with integrity and fiscal accountability. I'm a bridge builder and will respect and celebrate the senior leadership of our church while mentoring and providing opportunities for our up-and-coming leaders. I'm a proven supporter of women in ministry and our laity and all the components of our church. It's a season for proven leadership. Eason for Bishop. My name is Gregory Eason, a candidate.
Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. This question is for all of our panelists. If you could just share with us any resources and ways to stay connected to our collective freedom journey that you hold dear. This can include personal works, documentary plugs for you, Sister Rose, upcoming events, and/or social media handles. How can people stay connected to our collective freedom journey?
Well, mine is pretty quick, so I'll go first. But I wanted you to just go to Mother Emannuel AME website, and in doing that, you get an opportunity to reach me through conversation about coming to visit us and just what's going on in the church as well. So that mine is pretty quick, short. Come to the church's website, Mother Emannuel AME.
Okay, I'll go. I am actually in the process of filming a documentary entitled One Last Breath, The Life of Reverend Dr. Daniel L. Simmons Sr. This documentary, it will be on my website. My film company is entitled littlelightentertainment.org. That's littlelightentertainment.org. You will find some stills, and I think we are posting a trailer in a couple of days or so. But we are in the middle of filming this documentary, and I believe we wrap in August. We will be at the General Conference, filming up there as well, doing interviews and so forth. And we're hoping to release on June 17th, 2025, in theaters across the country. And it's going to be great. I think you're going to like it. This is the first of several projects that I have that are surrounding the events of that day. So, littlelightentertainment.org.
Great. And for me, I just want to uplift documentaries that we probably already are familiar with, but the great documentary that is Emmanuel, for those who might want a little bit more context and history, definitely go see that. And Juneteenth, Faith and Freedom, which was by Our Daily Bread. Both of those are on YouTube and Amazon, I believe. So if you don't know, check them out. For me personally, I work with faith communities and non-faith communities on strategic impact for how to govern your own lives. We have a big election coming up, so I do a lot of work with identifying how to mobilize people in that regard. And we do strategic impact planning for how to change these systems. So you can reach me on all social media platforms using @L Robin Murray, as you see it on the screen.
All right, family. Well, you heard it from them directly how to stay connected. So I invite you to do so. We did have one question in our chat box. And so I want to give credence to that, Miss Stimson asked, what are some boots on the ground activities local churches can do to change things and make sure we do not forget what has happened in our history?
I'm happy to jump in. Boots on the ground is definitely my thing. One of the things that I love is that there are ways to work outside of the walls of the church. If one thing we learned in the pandemic is that as communities of faith, we can still have impact beyond the walls of one building. And so I would recommend getting to know your neighbors, have a conversation, invite them to the block party, go to local events that are happening in the city, to be able to understand who they are and what their needs are. And building those relationships is so foundational and pivotal, first start to being able to engage the community, because that will ultimately, I know by experience, lead to mobilizing them to, again, address those issues that they're faced with. And it gives us as a faith community more knowledge and awareness of where God is leading us and needing us to be in order to impact God's people.
If I may add to that as well, too, one of the things I would say from, again, history perspective, don't wait for someone else to tell your story. Tell your story yourself. In the times that we're in right now, we have to go forward and do that. If that means creating your own history course and mini school, I would encourage you to do it. A lot of things are being threatened now. And so the best way is for us, as we've always done, and the church has always been a huge part of that, to create your own storytelling time and control our narrative. Again, if we don't tell our own story, somebody's going to steal it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing that I've done myself is I invite someone that doesn't look like me to come to church with me. And I also, sometimes I don't even have an invitation. I just invite myself to go to a church where no one looks like me. And that's just my little way of trying to make a change.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your insights and for your perspective. Reverend Dr. Anne-Marie Mingo added in the comment section that book clubs at churches to read some of the books others are banning, helping to collect oral histories and share our own story. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Mingo, for that recommendation. And thank you all for joining, for tuning in, because you all make the work that we do together possible. Thank you to all of our panelists for the work that you are doing, both within and outside of this space. We're grateful for you and how you carry the mantle, not only for our ancestors and those in our past, but how you carry the mantle for those who are coming behind you. We're grateful for your work and the ways that you are blazing the way. So thank you to all of you. And I look forward to welcoming you all back for more conversations just like this one, so that we can master our history, master our story, and be the authors and finishers of our own lineage. All right. So I will see you all right here next time. Peace, family. Until then.
Thank you, Reverend Brooks, for your work.
Thank you so much.